Chapter 1. The Scent of Absence. The silence was a thick, poisonous air the king could barely breathe. Kaelen, massive even when slumped, stood rooted at the threshold of the princess's nursery. It's been 5 days. The air here still held Lyra's sweet, bright scent, cloves and meadow grass, but the objects that should have been animated by her tiny, chaotic energy sat still, mocking him. His goal was simple: find Lyra at any cost. His state was a devastating cocktail of grief and the icy control of an alpha king who couldn't afford to break. A growl rose in his throat. It should never have happened. Truth be told, the kidnapping felt less like a random attack and more like a cruel echo of the night his Luna died. Maybe it was fate, the kind that cursed powerful alphas to watch their loved ones shatter. Footsteps scraped the polished obsidian floor, heavy and unwelcome. Lord Regent Cassian Vane, a beta whose ambition reeked of stale parchment and quiet malice, entered with a practiced sigh. "Your Majesty," Vane's voice was too smooth, like oil poured over stone. "We've scoured the eastern borderlands again, per my strategy. My teams are tireless because they understand the necessity of public order right now." Kaelen turned, his golden eyes, usually the color of slow-burning embers, blazing with cold fire. Not only that, Vane's presence, his calm, made Kaelen's instincts surge, warning him of a predator. "Tireless," Kaelen repeated, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Yet my heir remains missing. The public order you speak of is irrelevant if the royal line is broken, Cassian." "Of course, sire." Vane offered an unhelpful, slightly condescending bow. "But a king must remain above the fray, a pillar of strength. What's worse, the council grows nervous about this vacuum of authority. We must present a united front. I have drafted a statement emphasizing your resilience." "A statement?" Kaelen felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The serpent is tightening its coils. More importantly, this blatant attempt to minimize the crisis and manage the optics solidified Kaelen's suspicion that Vane was involved. "Was it Vane who broke my Luna?" "Dismissed, Regent," Kaelen commanded, the words slicing through the air. "I need no prepared script for grief. I need my daughter." Vane gave a final, stiff nod, his features momentarily tightening. A small victory for Kaelen because it showed Vane resented being ordered away. Kaelen waited until the faint scent of Vane's expensive cologne was completely gone. After that, he moved to the hidden latch on the wall, summoning the only man he truly trusted, the head of the guard, Rylan. The chilling truth remained: his enemy wore the mantle of his ally, and Kaelen was dangerously isolated. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Secret War. The king's private study was carved out of the palace's deepest level, a granite lair where Kaelen conducted his true business. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and his alpha musk, a heavy, anxious scent. Rylan appeared through the shadowed archway, a man whose loyalty smelled like rain on dry earth, clean, simple. "Rylan," Kaelen began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We've established the rogue's trail was too clean." Rylan nodded, his eyes grim. "It was a diversion, Your Majesty. As a result, the official reports are useless. The attack was surgical, not random." Kaelen moved to a table scattered with crude sketches, a visual representation of the flawed intelligence. What followed was a quiet, intense discussion, the only sounds the rustle of maps and the low murmur of their voices. "The rogues were paid," Kaelen stated, his hand flat on a sketch of the ransom note. "Paid by someone within my council. Because of that, only a fool would believe this was solely about destabilization. It's about seizing the throne, Rylan. The way they took Elara's mother." Kaelen paused, the name of his deceased Luna catching in his throat, a jagged memory. In that moment he saw the pale face of his Luna, still and quiet. Her death was never just grief, it was a political hit. This grief, this anger, fueled his current goal: find the internal leak before they act again. "I need you to pull Jaren off rotation," Kaelen directed, his voice regaining its command. "Jaren is the only one who can move through the palace ghosts. He is to do nothing but follow Vane's movements. Don't let him leave Vane's shadow. Not only that, find the source of Vane's wealth expansion over the last 2 years." Rylan's expression didn't change, but his scent darkened slightly. Tracking the Lord Regent, sire? That's high risk. High stakes, Rylan, Kaelen corrected, his gaze unyielding. Lyra's life, the future of the kingdom. They are at stake. If Vayne is behind this, he broke my home once, he won't do it again. Who would you trust when the very air you breathe is poisoned by deceit? This question haunted Kaelen. But then the heavy oak door of the study rattled. A young messenger, Alpha, panting, stumbled in, his uniform dusted with the ash of the city's outskirts. Your Majesty. Sighting. Unverified, sir, but reports of a small girl matching the princess's description, found near the old waterworks, in the Shadow District of Vesper. Kaelen's heart skipped. The Shadow District, the furthest from the court, the poorest, a maze of stone walls and forgotten people. His isolation was momentarily forgotten. All that mattered was the sudden raw surge of paternal hope. Chapter 3, The Omega's Touch. The Shadow District reeked of unwashed wool, damp stone, and desperation, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of the Obsidian Palace. Kaelen and his small retinue moved fast, their polished boots thudding on the uneven cobblestones. The atmosphere here was thick and oppressive, like mud clinging to a boot. They found her in a crumbling alcove, Lyra. She was dirty, her hair tangled, but alive. Overwhelming relief hit Kaelen like a physical blow, so potent it almost buckled his knees. Lyra wasn't alone. She was huddled against a small, timid woman. An Omega. The Omega smelled of wood smoke and a faint, sweet, earthy scent Kaelen couldn't quite place. This was Elara. Her wide, frightened eyes, the color of moss after a rain, darted between Kaelen and Lyra. Papa! Lyra cried, her small arms reaching out. Kaelen knelt, pulling his daughter into his chest, burying his face in her hair. My little flame, he choked out, the formality momentarily dissolved by raw emotion. In the span of a breath, the relief faded, replaced by cold suspicion. Why is this Omega here? Was she the lure? Elara shrank back instantly, her shoulders curling forward, embodying her societal role as the unnoticed, the weak. Kaelen straightened, his alpha control snapping back into place, cold and absolute. His goal was to secure Lyra and remove all variables. You, Kaelen said, his voice flat, gesturing to the Omega. You found my daughter. Elara's voice was barely a whisper, trembling like a fragile leaf. Why, yes, your Majesty. She was hurt. Kaelen cut her off. Without another word, he reached into his tunic and produced a pouch heavy with gold. Take this, he commanded, dropping the pouch at her feet. It is enough to start a new life. Leave the capital tonight. Forget you ever saw my daughter. That's why I am paying you well. You are at a loose end. Kaelen believed everyone had a price, because that's how the world had always worked for him. The money lay at the edge of Elara's worn leather shoes. She stared at it, her face pale. But then Lyra stepped forward, placing her tiny hand fiercely over the pouch. Her own eyes, her mother's golden eyes, were blazing, a tiny alpha fury. No. Lyra's voice rang out, clear and defiant. Elara stays. She saved me. My head was bleeding, and Elara touched it. It stopped hurting right away. She saved me with a touch. Kaelen frowned, his suspicion deepening. A touch. Yes. She's good. She's brave. Lyra insisted, placing Elara's trembling hand into Kaelen's own enormous, calloused one. The moment their eyes locked, Kaelen's powerful alpha senses, tuned for deception and threats, registered nothing but raw, selfless terror from the Omega. Still, the contact was unexpected. The Omega's skin was rough, calloused from work, yet a strange, deep warmth pulsed from her palm into his. It was a jolt, not painful but utterly jarring, a brief, disorienting moment that caused his heart to skip. What was that? Kaelen snatched his hand back immediately, the contact leaving a ghost of warmth on his skin. This Omega was not a simple peasant. She was an enigma, a puzzle he now had to solve. As the wind shifted, carrying her unique, earthy scent, Kaelen made an instantaneous, politically disastrous decision. I see, Kaelen murmured, his eyes fixed on Elara's terrified face. The princess is quite insistent. He dismissed the gold with a flick of his boot. You will not leave the capital, Omega. Instead you will come back with us. You are now the princess's personal guard. Elara's breath caught. Her world tilted. Her world tilted from the edge of poverty and anonymity to the terrifying, paranoid heart of the Obsidian Palace. Just like that, everything changed, setting Kaelen, the grief-stricken Alpha King, on a course of conflict, not with an enemy outside his walls, but with the terrifying prospect of trusting the very core of his kingdom to a mysterious Omega. Chapter 4: The Royal Bargain. The Obsidian Palace's royal chamber was the opposite of the Shadow District, cold, clean, and utterly sterile. The air, usually crisp with royal authority, was now tense, thick with the conflicting sense of Elara's fear and Kaelen's rising curiosity. Kaelen sat behind the massive granite desk, a silent, imposing judge. Elara stood before him, small and hunched, still wearing the common mud-stained clothes. His goal was to determine if this Omega was a rogue agent or a simple fool, and if her touch was a threat. You claim, Kaelen began, leaning forward, his voice low and dangerous, that a touch healed the deepest lacerations on the heir's head? Omega healing is known for minor afflictions, if at all. Not that. Elara lifted her gaze, the timid movement belying the fierce intensity Kaelen had glimpsed earlier. I don't claim anything, Your Majesty, she whispered, her voice like the faint rattle of winter leaves. I just helped her. It was instinct. I wanted the pain to stop. Instinct, Kaelen repeated, his tone laced with impatient suspicion. He dismissed her poverty-driven fear. He focused coldly on how she healed Lyra. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't meet his gaze for long. You understand, Kaelen continued, his jaw tight, that bringing you, an unregistered commoner Omega, into the palace is a political vulnerability? It means I must defend your existence here to powerful enemies. Why should I? After that, the truth of his inner conflict echoed in the room. He didn't want to trust her, he couldn't risk it. Trust is what got my Luna killed. Deep down he knew the truth, he was desperate. I can leave, Elara offered quickly, her hands twisting her simple tunic. You can still take the money, sire. Lyra is safe. She is safe because of you, Kaelen corrected, a flash of grudging respect mixing with the suspicion. As the silence stretched, the sound of a small rhythmic humming filled the air. Lyra sitting quietly in a window seat, drawing. But then Lyra pushed off the seat and marched over. She didn't look at her powerful father. Her focus was solely on Elara. Elara stays, Papa, Lyra declared, her voice firm. She took Elara's hand, then placed both Elara's and her own small hands squarely on Kaelen's massive, surprised palm. She stays because she's mine. In that moment, Kaelen's formidable control wavered. Lyra hadn't smiled, truly smiled, since her mother's death. Her insistence, her fierce protectiveness of this fragile Omega, was a new, terrifying variable. What followed was a faint, unfamiliar flicker of something. A deep, resonant warmth from Elara's palm, intensified by Lyra's presence, pulsing into his own skin. It felt like a frozen stream suddenly finding a current. Wrong? No, not wrong, but utterly disorienting and compelling. The conflict deepened. Kaelen had to choose between political expediency and the first sign of emotional healing in his daughter. As if pulled by a string, Kaelen tightened his fingers slightly around Elara's hand, a possessive, protective gesture he couldn't explain, before forcing himself to release her. Chapter 5: The Decree of the King. The main corridor of the Obsidian Palace, with its soaring black marble columns, was designed to emphasize the majesty and immensity of Kaelen's rule. Kaelen's goal was to deflect Vane's public attack while solidifying his decision to keep Elara. He was intercepted near the grand staircase. Lord Regent Vane, always punctual for public confrontations, materialized with two high-ranking Alpha advisors. Their collective sent a heavy wave of judgment. Your Majesty, Vane began, his voice carrying just enough volume to be overheard by passing dignitaries. I must advise against the introduction of a common Omega into the personal staff of the princess. Not only that, the court finds it deeply unsettling. It's politically destabilizing. An insult to the nobility, sire, Because it undermines the established hierarchy. Kaelen halted, meeting Vane's stare with cold authority. The hierarchy, Kaelen. Kaelen's voice carried the deep, undeniable bass of a ruling alpha, like a gong struck in a high cavern, is designed to protect my heir. This Omega saved her life. Therefore, she is the most effective guard available. A guard? Vane sneered, his tone sharp. She's an Omega. A lowborn, untrained, unremarkable scent. She should be rewarded and banished, not enthroned next to the future of the kingdom. She is not enthroned, Kaelen replied, a slow, dangerous smile touching his lips. He used Vane's words against him, twisting the knife. She is placed where I deem her most effective. The crown's decree is final. Elara is the princess's personal sentinel. As a result, Vane's face flushed with poorly concealed rage. Kaelen was now locked into defending Elara, a fact that pleased the strategic part of his brain. He had drawn Vane into the light, but terrified the protective father in him. He knew Vane would strike at the weakest link, and right now that was Elara. You defy the council's quiet counsel for a common healer? Vane challenged, his voice laced with thinly veiled threat. I defy any council that places politics above my daughter's safety and happiness, Kaelen countered, staring Vane down. Even so, Kaelen recognized the political risk. His stubborn defiance here was fueled by a sudden, intense desire to protect the small, trembling Omega who had touched him earlier. Which meant he was actively choosing his daughter's emotional well-being over centuries of rigid political protocol. Kaelen gestured down the hall. Meanwhile, two loyal but massive royal guards were escorting Elara toward the private wing. She walked with her head down, utterly overwhelmed by the opulence and the pervasive paranoia of the palace. She looked utterly terrified, like a small wild bird trapped inside a jeweled cage. Kaelen watched her go. Just like that, he had publicly made her a symbol, an asset, and Vane's primary target. Chapter 6: The Cold Comfort. That night, Kaelen visited Elara's new chambers. They were small by palace standards, but still ridiculously opulent. Dark velvet hangings, polished walnut furniture, and a window overlooking the sweeping royal gardens. The room felt entirely too large for the small figure huddled on the edge of the silk-covered bed. Kaelen entered, the heavy door closing behind him with a resonant thud that seemed to swallow the room's remaining air. His new immediate goal was to contain the threat she represented while securing her protective instinct toward Lyra. Elara sprang up, bowing deeply, her movements jerky with fear. Her natural scent of earth and cinnamon was now tightly suppressed, replaced by a terrified, metallic edge. "Your Majesty," she whispered, her hands clasped tightly. "Do not bow," Kaelen commanded, stepping into the room. He needed her to understand the danger. "You are Lyra's guard. You stand with confidence." He paced the room slowly, his heavy boots sounding loud on the plush carpet. "You are now a symbol, Omega. A powerful one because the court hates symbols they don't control. Cassian Vane, the Lord Regent, and his faction, they want me gone. They kidnapped my daughter to prove I was weak. You ruined their plan." He stopped, fixing her with his gaze. "They will try to frame you, poison you, or discard you. Do not trust the servants, the food, or the sweet words of any noble. Every shadow here holds a knife." To make things worse, his formal, distant tone was deliberate. He was trying to re-establish control over his chaotic life. Elara listened, her eyes wide, absorbing every word. "And if I try to leave?" she asked softly. "You won't," Kaelen said, his alpha tone softening only slightly. "You are not leaving Lyra. I saw how you protected her in the streets. You are here to keep her safe. That is your only purpose." Kaelen's choice to protect Elara physically, by giving her palace guards and confining her to the private wing, was a major hint at his eventual ability to trust. Still, he couldn't let his guard down. "You understand the terms, Elara?" She nodded silently, her gaze finally lifting, challenging his for a brief second. In that flicker, Kaelen caught a flash of deep, quiet resolve beneath the terror. She wasn't simply scared, she was deciding. This woman is not easily intimidated. "I understand, Your Majesty," she said, her voice steadying. "I will protect the princess." Before she could move, Kaelen was gone, leaving her alone in the overwhelming luxury. The threshold was crossed. Elara was locked in the heart of the conflict, and Kaelen was committed to defending the one person who could either save or destroy his entire kingdom. Chapter 7. The Viper's First Strike. Kaelen stood in his private observation room, a hidden space carved behind a section of the Grand Library, looking through a one-way obsidian lens. His goal was simple: observe Elara's reaction to the court and ensure she didn't break or react violently. The scene below was the morning court gathering. It was the first time Elara had been officially presented as the princess's sentinel. She was visibly struggling. Her simple gown, a hurried palace issue, looked lost next to the shimmering silks and rich velvets of the nobility. Her scent, usually earthy and quiet, was strained, sharp with terror. A young, minor noble, Lord Renwick, a known sycophant of Vane, approached Elara. Renwick wore the smug, self-satisfied air of a spoiled puppy. Kaelen's state was detached judgment mixed with cold respect for her composure. Look at her. She presents the archetype of the weak Omega. She knows her place. Still she did not flee. Renwick offered a mocking bow. The king has certainly lowered his standards, he drawled, loud enough for others to hear. An unregistered commoner Omega? Pray tell, what unique talent does one possess to warrant this royal attention? Can you polish boots with your tears, perhaps? Elara's head snapped up. Her internal monologue must have been screaming, but externally she held still. She answered with a simple, quiet dignity that surprised Kaelen. My only talent, my lord, is ensuring the princess's safety. A task I was deemed worthy of by the Alpha King himself. Renwick merely laughed, a short, nasty sound. Despite that, Elara's composure held. She embodied the identity versus destiny conflict in that moment, choosing courage over her ingrained fear. Kaelen's lips thinned. Vane's testing her. This wasn't just an insult, it was a public challenge to Kaelen's authority, delivered through a proxy. Because of that, Kaelen's patience snapped. The turning point: Kaelen left the observation room immediately. He summoned Renwick to his solar an hour later. Renwick arrived, still smelling faintly of condescension. Kaelen didn't raise his voice. He didn't even mention Elara. Instead, Kaelen spoke only of Renwick's family's long-standing lucrative trade contracts. Lord Renwick, Kaelen said, his voice quiet, almost kind, like a frost settling on a window pane. Your family's grain shipments have been subpar. Effective immediately, your trade contracts are terminated. You are dismissed from court. Your lands remain yours for now. But I expect you to remember your place. The color drained from Renwick's face. He knew this wasn't about grain. He knew the Alpha King had issued a quiet, ruthless warning. That's why his final scent as he backed away was pure, terrified submission. Kaelen's action highlighted the atmosphere of paranoia. He saw everything. The impact. Kaelen had sent a clear message to Vane. Attack her and I will destroy you politically, one loyalist at a time. Chapter 8. A Glimpse of the Light. Come morning, the next day was deceptively peaceful. Kaelen's goal was simple: understand the nature of the bond forming between Elara and Lyra. His state was one of intense, guarded curiosity. He watched from his office window overlooking the private gardens. Elara and Lyra were playing near the central marble fountain. Lyra, usually withdrawn, was animated. She was laughing genuinely for the first time in years. The sound, bright, clear, and fragile, was like a forgotten melody played anew. Kaelen felt a sharp pang of longing, a raw, unprotected emotion he hadn't experienced since his Luna was alive. Elara was unguarded for a moment. Her Omega scent was no longer metallic with fear. It was softening, blossoming with a subtle, protective calm. She was chasing Lyra, her usual timid movements replaced by a playful lightness. Elara, catch me! Lyra shrieked, skidding slightly on the mossy stone. Careful little flame, Elara cautioned, her voice warm. She scooped Lyra up in a dizzying circle. Kaelen realized why his traumatized daughter trusted this stranger instantly. Elara's empathy was real. This tiny success chipped away at Kaelen's emotional wall, linking Elara to his deepest desire: Lyra's happiness. which meant she was becoming more than an asset, she was becoming essential. But then the unguarded moment shattered. Lyra scraped her knee on the fountain's edge. It was a minor injury, yet Lyra let out a startled cry. Elara knelt instantly. Without thinking, Elara placed her hands directly on Lyra's wound, her expression one of fierce, selfless concentration. Kaelen, miles away but focused, swore he saw a faint, pale green glow surround her hands for just an instant. Elara pulled her hands back quickly, looking horrified. She glanced frantically toward the palace windows. Her body moved on instinct, shielding Lyra from view. The wound was already closing. Elara scooped Lyra into her arms and, looking terrified, retreated inside. Kaelen's confusion mounted. She hadn't only healed the cut instantly, but her terror wasn't about the injury, it was about being seen. She was intentionally keeping her true power a secret, even from him. Chapter 9. The Test of the Hand. Moments later, the unexpected happened. Kaelen was observing a Beta Council member in the inner courtyard when the Beta suddenly clutched his chest, sinking to his knees with a gasping, wet cough. High-stakes conflict erupted instantly. The Beta was a neutral vote Kaelen desperately needed. Get the royal physicians. Kaelen roared, already moving. But before the physicians could arrive, Lyra and Elara, who had been passing nearby, rushed forward. Lyra was frantic, clutching Elara's tunic. Save him, Elara. Like you saved me. Elara froze. Her eyes flew to Kaelen, wide and desperate, begging him to stop this. In that moment, Kaelen saw her true fear, exposure. But the Beta was dying and Kaelen was desperate. His goal was simple: keep the Beta alive regardless of the political cost. Heal him, Omega. Kaelen commanded, the authority in his voice leaving no room for argument. She didn't know what scared her more, disobeying the king or revealing her truth. With a small, defeated nod, Elara knelt by the Beta. The climax: Elara placed both hands on the Beta's chest. This time there was no subtle glow. A radiant, undeniable silver-blue energy pulsed from her palms, warming the cold stone beneath her. The air thickened. Kaelen could feel the energy. It was clean, primal, and immense, a scent of pure, life-giving power washing over the courtyard. The Beta gasped, the spasm in his chest instantly ceasing. He opened his eyes, healthy color rushing back to his face. Elara collapsed back, utterly exhausted, her hands shaking. The sight of the energy, the immediacy of the cure, it was undeniable. Kaelen knelt by her, ignoring the stunned silence of the guards and servants. His state was shock mixed with intellectual intrigue. This Omega possessed a power that defied all known lineage laws. She was a powerful asset, and a political liability massive enough to topple his regime. What are you?" Kaelen whispered, his voice stripped bare of its royal authority. Elara was unable to speak, only meeting his eyes with the raw terror of someone whose last, most dangerous secret had been ripped into the light. The impact. Elara's identity as a simple commoner Omega was shattered. As if the world narrowed to just her and Kaelen, a debt was forged that went beyond saving Lyra. Kaelen realized Elara was far more than a commoner. Soon after, Kaelen left Elara with Ryland's best men and marched straight to his private library, his mind already churning with frantic hypotheses. He needed answers. He needed to search for lore related to Omega healers. The path was set. Kaelen's initial distrust of Elara was now complicated by an intense, consuming intellectual curiosity and a recognition of power that terrified him. Chapter 10: The Political Poison. The air in Kaelen's private study was stale with the dust of centuries. Kaelen had been there for hours, surrounded by scrolls and tomes, the scent of old paper and ink competing with his anxious alpha musk. His goal was to understand the extent of Elara's power. His state was a frenetic mix of intellectual obsession and fear. He barely noticed when Ryland, the secret loyal agent, entered, smelling faintly of the cold stone tunnels he'd navigated. "Your Majesty, bad news," Ryland reported, his voice tight. "The council member Elara healed, Beta Lord Theron. He's been poisoned, near fatal this time. The physicians say it was a slow-acting toxin. The one that hit him earlier was just a distraction." Kaelen slammed his fist onto the table. Vane. He knew Vane had orchestrated the incident, because Vane was using the chaos of the poisoning to demand a vote on the Omega's removal. Desperation turned to a calculated realization. Kaelen now had proof of Vane's ruthlessness and Elara's crucial utility. Rising stakes. Kaelen had to keep Theron alive, or Vane would use the Beta's death to seize political ground. Without warning, Kaelen made a decision that would expose everything. Bring Elara to the infirmary, Kaelen commanded. She will heal him publicly. Rylan, ensure a dozen high-ranking Betas and Alphas, mostly Vane's neutrals, witnessed the entire process. And fetch Scholar Line. Now. In the stark, antiseptic infirmary, the scent of sickness was overwhelming. Theron was barely breathing. Kaelen felt the pressure building, heavy and oppressive, like the granite walls of the palace closing in. Elara arrived, terrified but resolute. Her core strength was her selfless empathy. She saw the dying man and the terrified medical staff, and her own fear momentarily vanished. She knelt, her hands moving instinctively to Theron's chest. The action, the silver-blue unifier energy flared again, brighter, stronger, forcing Kaelen to shield his eyes. He heard gasps from the onlookers. Elara held the power, her body shuddering with the immense effort, before the toxin was visibly purged, leaving Theron breathing clean, deep breaths. By the time the glow faded, Elara collapsed, spent. Kaelen looked at the witnesses. They were silent, stunned. They now knew Vane was a murderer, and the Omega was powerful enough to defy death itself. But then the side door burst open. Scholar Line, a frantic, nervous Beta Kaelen relied on for obscure knowledge, stumbled in. He was clutching an ancient, brittle scroll, his face white with terror and awe. Chapter 11, The Midpoint Revelation. Your Majesty. You must see this. The healing signature, the color, the intensity, it matches. Scholar Line stammered, his hands shaking so violently the paper threatened to crumble. Kaelen pushed past the stunned observers, taking the scroll. The parchment felt thin and fragile, but the symbols etched on it were heavy with historical weight. In the echo of the scholar's voice, Kaelen focused, forcing his alpha mind to translate the archaic script. The text spoke of the Unifier Omega lineage, a line thought extinct for millennia. They were Omegas whose empathy didn't just heal small wounds, but could unify the essence of a fractured spirit or a poisoned body. The prophecy warned they would either shatter or cement the kingdom. The revelation. Kaelen's eyes scanned the final passage. When the Alpha King, burdened by grief and distrust, meets the Omega whose touch reclaims life, the destiny of Vesper will shift. Kaelen's reaction was a mixture of fear and exhilarating shock. This wasn't just about saving his daughter. This was about the foundations of his entire world. His understanding shifted from commoner to destiny. His immediate goal: secure Elara's life and conceal the existence of this text from Vane. Because of that, he snatched the scroll, feeling a primal possessive urge to hide this truth from all threats. The midpoint shift. Elara was no longer a political annoyance. She was the key to both the kingdom's salvation and Kaelen's ruin. His protective instinct became deeply personal, fueled by a terrifying blend of duty and destiny. Before either could speak, Kaelen turned to Line, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Not a word, scholar. On pain of death. This text does not exist. He rushed from the infirmary, the scroll clutched tight. He had to tell Elara. He reached her new chambers, only to find them empty. Kaelen's heart pounded so loudly he could hear it over the sound of his own movement. She was gone. Without warning, Lyra's tiny voice called out from the connecting bedroom. Papa? Elara went to the quiet room. She said she needed to feel safe. Chapter 12, The Shadowed Alliance. Kaelen tracked Elara down to a hidden, dusty corner of the palace's secondary archives, the quiet room. The room smelled of neglected velvet and forgotten secrets. He found her seated on a stone bench, a stack of old water-damaged texts beside her. She was researching her own power. You read the old tongue, Kaelen stated, his voice raw with urgency. His goal was to gain her full, willing commitment and trust, because destiny demanded it. Elara looked up, her moss-green eyes wide. Her voice trembled as she pointed to a fragmented text. I recognized the symbols. I found the whispers about the Unifier lineage. It says we are meant to heal the land and bind the Alpha's heart. And that we are dangerous. Kaelen knelt before her, breaching his emotional distance for the first time in years. He shared the truth, handing her the complete, undamaged scroll. This is why Vayne will hunt you until the dust claims him. This is why I have to protect you. The bond deepened. The intimacy of sharing such a terrifying secret was a far more powerful commitment than any royal decree. Protect me or use me, Your Majesty? She asked, her gaze piercing. I have spent 4 years haunted by the fact that I couldn't protect my Luna, Kaelen admitted, the confession urgent and raw. I failed her because I was too guarded to see the enemy right beside me. I won't fail you, Elara. Not if you trust me. You are not a pawn. You are the only person, Alpha or Omega, who can fight Vayne's poison. New direction/urgency, Kaelen affirmed his choice. He wasn't protecting her because she was useful. He was protecting her because she was right, and she was linked to his daughter's happiness. As the bond pulsed between them, a sudden cold scent of ozone, unmistakable to an Alpha, wafted through the small room's air vent. Kaelen's head snapped up. Without a sound, he moved Elara behind a massive iron cabinet. We have company, he whispered, his body tense. The air thickened with danger. A shadow, thin and quick, flickered across the single dusty window before vanishing. Vayne's spy. The confrontation was not just political, it was a race against time. Vayne now knew Kaelen was hiding Elara, and the king had just exposed himself to a threat he couldn't see. Chapter 13, The Royal Gambit. The scent of ozone was gone, but the presence of Vayne's spy lingered, a cold, stale reminder of the danger. Kaelen's goal had shifted. He wasn't just defending Elara. He was using the revelation of her lineage to push Vayne into a corner. His state was strategic, feeling hopeful and energized by the unexpected presence of a true partner. Kaelen called an impromptu royal council session. After that, he moved fast. He leveraged the widespread, stunned witnessing of Elara's healing power from the previous day. The Beta Lord Theron lives, gentlemen, Kaelen announced, his voice ringing through the council chambers. He was saved by the same mysterious gift that protected my daughter. This power is undeniable and its nature is benevolent. Vayne, seated at the head of the table, leaned back, a sneer plastered on his face. His scent was heavy with arrogance, like expensive wine gone sour. Benevolent, sire? Vayne's tone was dry, dismissive. Or simply unregistered sorcery, which has historically caused nothing but war. We maintain that Omega should be relegated to the districts, where their distractions cannot impede the work of Alphas. On the contrary, Regent, Kaelen countered, using the new knowledge from the scrolls. The ancient texts speak of the need for balance between our castes to ensure the stability of Vesper. Therefore, I propose a crucial reform, allowing non-alpha counselors to advise on healthcare and resource distribution, issues where the Beta and Omega populations have superior knowledge. This was Kaelen's royal gambit. He was using Elara's presence as a symbol of change to directly challenge Vayne's conservative faction. Elara supported him quietly, standing slightly behind Lyra near the chamber doors, a silent, powerful monument to the future. Vayne was visibly jolted. This wasn't just about Elara. This was about stripping his traditional power base. His face flushed with poorly concealed fury. You risk fracturing the very foundation of our sovereignty for the sake of one commoner, sire. That is the act of a weak king, Vayne hissed, keeping his voice dangerously low. I risk nothing, Kaelen. I am testing the loyalty of my council, Kaelen challenged, staring Vayne down. Even so, the tension in the room was brittle, like a sheet of thin ice over a raging river. Kaelen had taken a huge risk, but the reaction was worth it. Vayne registered the direct threat. The meeting adjourned in cold fury. Kaelen followed Vayne out. Without a sound, Kaelen positioned himself, waiting. Vayne stopped in the corridor, his eyes dark with predatory rage. She may be destiny, sire, but prophecies are easily corrupted. I advise you to remember that Lyra's future safety depends on the stability of her father's reign, not his choice of playmates. Kaelen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the palace stone. A veiled threat against Lyra's future safety. Vayne was raising the stakes to the only thing Kaelen truly feared to lose. My commitment is no longer political, it is survival. Chapter 14. Assassination Attempt. The evening brought the court gala, a shimmering, deadly circus designed to force the appearance of stability. Kaelen's goal was to defend Elara publicly and show no hesitation. His state was one of cold fury and hypervigilance, his senses screaming for danger. Elara was stiff in a borrowed silver gown, her scent tight with anxiety. Kaelen kept her close to Lyra, near the massive ballroom fireplace. But then the danger didn't come from Vayne himself. A younger, ambitious alpha named Lord Darien, known for his volatile nature and fierce loyalty to Vayne, approached Elara with a glass of spiced wine. He moved with the oily smoothness of a trained predator. A toast to the king's new favorite, the Omega Sentinel, Darien purred, offering the drink. Kaelen had been watching Darien all night. In the quiet that followed, Kaelen saw the faint, almost invisible tremor in Darien's hand, a sign of adrenaline. Poison. The escalation. Darien didn't wait for Elara to take the glass. Without warning, he deliberately knocked his elbow, causing the wine to spill down the front of Elara's gown and onto the polished floor. How clumsy of me. Darien apologized with false charm. At the same time he pressed a small, wickedly sharp silver stylus into Elara's arm, just beneath the fabric, meant to deliver a localized neurotoxin. Kaelen reacted on pure alpha instinct. His body moved on instinct, a blur of royal blue and gold. He shoved Elara violently behind him, taking the shallow, agonizing strike meant for her. A white-hot sear ripped through Kaelen's forearm as the toxin entered his bloodstream. Darien, realizing he had hit the king, froze, his face collapsing in sheer panic. Kaelen didn't yell. He didn't even growl. He grabbed Darien's wrist and twisted, snapping the bone with a sickening crack. Darien screamed, a high human sound that shattered the ballroom's music. Guards! Treason! Kaelen commanded, his voice a low, terrifying snarl. His goal was to publicly show no hesitation in protecting her over protocol. His state was primal fury, protective instinct overriding every layer of stoicism. The impact. Kaelen looked at Elara, whose eyes were wide with shock, gratitude and fresh terror. He had chosen her safety over his own and exposed Vayne's violent tactics. Vayne now knew Kaelen was personally invested, a vulnerability the king could no longer hide. Kaelen, ignoring the burning in his arm, ordered the Alpha's execution without trial, a desperate, politically dangerous move that sent a seismic shock through the court. Chapter 15. Defending the Omega. The next day, Kaelen stood before the full Loyalists' Council, the wound on his forearm tightly bandaged. The room smelled of antiseptic, fear, and the combined scent of a pack sensing weakness. His goal was to preserve Elara's freedom and life. Vayne opened the proceedings, his face a mask of false grief. Your Majesty, we are all relieved you survived the brutal attempt on your life. However, the perpetrator, Lord Darien, was a close associate of the Omega Sentinel before he defected to my faction. Vayne raised his voice, loud and accusatory. It is my duty to demand Elara's immediate arrest for treason. The evidence, false though it may be, links her to the assassination attempt. To do otherwise is to invite civil war. Kaelen was furious, fighting for control. His state was a furious blend of anger and desperation, recognizing he was nearing the loss of his own power. Treason? Kaelen scoffed. Lord Darien struck me to reach her, Kaelen. He failed and he is dead. Because of that, the idea that Elara, who has healed the heir, protected a key Beta Lord, and was herself the target of the assassin you claim she conspired with, is responsible, is a farce. You defend a low-born Omega against the collective wisdom of your council, sire? An elder Alpha challenged. I defend the truth, Kaelen roared, standing so quickly his chair scraped back violently. I defend the future. She is not just an Omega, she is the Unifier lineage. I have seen the scrolls. I have seen the power. You choose to cling to outdated fears while this kingdom bleeds from the treason you whisper in the halls. The declaration of the Unifier lineage caused gasps. Kaelen had just played his highest card, choosing Elara over political expediency. He had burned every bridge to protect her. Vane looked momentarily stunned but quickly recovered, his eyes glinting with victory. Prophecy or not, sire, treason is treason. Your defense is commendable, but the council must vote on her immediate detention. Kaelen looked at the council. He had lost. The fear of prophecy mixed with Vane's political leverage was too strong. Very well, Kaelen conceded, his voice heavy with defeat. But any guard who places a hand on the princess's sentinel will answer to me, King of Vesper, first. Elara, who had been standing silent by the door, met Kaelen's eyes one last time before Vane's loyal guards surrounded her. The space between them burned with shared peril and a profound, desperate understanding. We are allies against the world. No turning back now. Kaelen had traded his political stability for Elara's life, locking them both into a final, inescapable conflict with Vane's power. Chapter 16, The Coup. The chill that descended upon the council hall was not from the stone. It was the cold weight of defeat. Kaelen watched Elara being dragged away by Vane's guards, her desperate, muffled cry echoing off the high arches. His goal to appeal to reason had failed completely. His state was pure, stunned shock, witnessing his kingdom and power slip away. Vane wasted no time. After that, he seized the center of the chamber, his voice oily with false regret. My lords, my betrayal, I mean the king's unstable judgment, is undeniable. His public defense of this unpredictable Omega, his rash execution of a loyal Alpha, and his desperate use of ancient, unverified prophecy as political leverage. All of this proves instability. Vane then presented the final blow. Falsified documents linking Elara's lineage not to the peaceful Unifier prophecy, but to an obscure, violent shadow pact that had fought the kingdom centuries ago. The evidence was irrefutable, because Vane had spent months making it so. The king is compromised, Vane declared, his voice ringing with victory. He risks our children's lives for his fascination with a dangerous commoner. As a result, I call for an emergency vote. Strip Kaelen of his political authority until a formal assessment of his mental fitness is completed. The vote was swift, crushing, and predictable. Kaelen's remaining loyalists were too few and too terrified to speak. With every heartbeat, Kaelen heard the voices of the men he had trusted choosing fear over courage. He was witnessing his kingdom dissolve. The king was broken. Vane successfully gained the upper hand and Kaelen felt his old trauma resurface. He had failed to protect his loved ones again. Without thinking, Kaelen slumped back, his head feeling heavy, his power draining away. He was confined. Vane approached Kaelen, leaning in close, a predatory whisper in the chaos. Enjoy your reflections, sire. The walls are soundproof. You won't hear her screams. What followed was the sound of Vane's loyal guards surrounding Kaelen, their sense smug and triumphant. As the air thickened with Vane's victory, Kaelen's personal guard, Rylan, was nowhere in sight, a small, desperate comfort, meaning Rylan hadn't been caught yet. Chapter 17, Isolated and Accused. Moments later, Kaelen was confined to his solar, the same room where he had ordered Darian's execution just hours before. The door was barred, guarded by Alphas loyal to Vane, their metallic sense a constant reminder of his imprisonment. His state was shattered, overwhelming guilt for his Luna and now for Elara and Lyra washing over him. His goal was to find a weakness in Vane's plan. Vane visited him, uninvited, carrying a crystal decanter of blood-red wine. He poured himself a glass, ignoring Kaelen, who stood by the window, rigid with controlled fury. I orchestrated the vote, Vane said, sipping the wine with relish. And the poisoning of Theron. The documents were convincing because people prefer a simple lie to a complex truth. It's so much easier for them to hate a powerful Omega than confront a powerful regent. Vane strolled past Kaelen, his breath smelling of wine and victory. And Lyra, the little princess. She's being moved to a secure location, sire. Away from the contamination of that Omega. Vane delivered the crushing news. Lyra was being removed, likely another kidnapping, this one sanctioned by the council. And my Luna, Kaelen grated out, his voice a low raw growl. Was that you too, Kaelen? Was her sickness orchestrated? Vane smiled, a wide, chilling grimace. In the span of a breath, the mask of the loyalist fell away completely. You were too focused on the outside threats, sire. Too guarded. Your Luna, bless her, was inconveniently fertile and dangerously empathetic. Yes, I orchestrated her death. Because the kingdom needed a king without weakness, and you were too blind to see me until I was already at the throat of your power. Lowest point achieved. Kaelen faced the ultimate loss and confronted the root of his trauma. He had failed to protect both women he loved, his Luna through political blindness and Elara through delayed trust. She didn't know what scared her more, the loss of his power or the depth of his isolation. Kaelen fell back into his chair, the world spinning. His heart skipped a beat later as his gaze caught a loose brick near the fireplace, the hidden compartment. He kept the evidence of the Luna's original death report, a file he had been holding for the perfect moment to expose Vane. The evidence is still there. Chapter 18, Dark Night of the Soul. That night, Kaelen was utterly alone. The guards outside were silent, the palace quiet, like a tomb that holds its secrets tightly. The full moon, usually a source of alpha strength, was hidden by thick clouds, casting the room in oppressive shadow. Kaelen pulled out a forgotten lavender-scented shawl of his deceased Luna from a chest. He buried his face in the soft fabric, the faint, sweet scent bringing a fresh wave of grief and guilt. I failed them all. His internal monologue was a barrage of self-recrimination. Trust equals death. I should have let Elara flee. Her destiny is too dangerous. I am cursed to watch the people I care for shatter. He was grappling with his internal misbelief. He almost gave up, ready to resign himself to Vane's temporary rule. Crucible moment. He looked at the hidden compartment, at the evidence he had been hoarding. I kept the proof for a perfect moment that never came. His failure wasn't trusting the wrong people, Vane. It was failing to trust himself to fight for the good, for the right thing, when the moment demanded it. He had chosen guardedness over action, and it cost him everything. He remembers Elara's selfless instinct from Act 1. Her eyes wide with terror, but her hands moving to heal the beta despite the catastrophic risk. Her soul answered the call of compassion, while Kaelen's soul answered the call of political caution. A flicker of resolve returned, sharp and clear. If Elara could face destiny with nothing but a compassionate touch, Kaelen, the Alpha King, could certainly face a traitorous regent with truth. He stood, gripping the shawl. With a single glance at the hiding place, he made his decision. The air thickened with renewed determination, replacing the heavy scent of despair. His goal? Survive the night and find Elara. The descent was over. Kaelen had hit rock bottom, but in the silence he found the reason to fight, not for his throne, but for the compassionate Omega whose power, he finally understood, was the only thing that could truly heal his broken kingdom. He had to trust her. Chapter 19, The Key. Kaelen stood by the hidden compartment, his heart pounding so loudly it was like a war drum in his chest. His goal was to regain control and use the secret proof he had foolishly hoarded. His state was one of focused, grim determination, replacing the resignation of the previous night. He pulled the loose brick, retrieving the slender, dust-covered file, the original, unedited autopsy report and intelligence on his Luna's death. He had kept it for years, a safety measure that became a cage. He regretted his delay in using the evidence. If I had trusted the truth over my fear then, Elara wouldn't be in a cell now. His soul answered with bitter self-reproach. Suddenly, a soft tap-tap came from the barred door. Kaelen froze, gripping the file tighter. Without warning, the heavy lock mechanism clicked, and the door swung open just enough for Rylan, his head of the guard, to slip inside. Rylan's scent was tight with adrenaline and relief. Your Majesty. I've been waiting for the guard rotation change. Vane's men are disciplined, but they are still men. Rylan's voice was low, urgent. We have maybe 40 minutes before the next sweep. Rylan, Kaelen acknowledged, a rush of renewed hope hitting him. Rylan was the one true loyal agent. The king realized the truth of the theme. His strength was in partnership, not solitary power. Kaelen immediately thrust the file into Ryland's hands. Vane killed the Luna. This is the proof. A clean transfer of funds and the original neurotoxin report. I need you to secure this and only present it when I give the signal. Not a moment before. Ryland stared at the contents, his face hardening with cold fury. The betrayal had cut him deeply. You knew this, sire? I knew the suspicion, Kaelen corrected, his voice raw with regret. And I protected the proof instead of using it. My mistake cost us everything. But then we fix it now. Kaelen immediately demanded to know Elara's location. Where did Vane put her? Ryland swallowed hard. The lower dungeons. The oldest part of the castle. She's isolated. Kaelen's determination intensified. He looked at Ryland, his eyes blazing. Get me out of this room. No. I need to see her. Chapter 20. The Unifier's Resolve. The lower dungeons reeked of damp earth, mildew, and the crushing despair of forgotten prisoners. Kaelen's state was vulnerable yet determined, the scent of his anxiety mixing with the cold, raw air. Ryland had secured him temporary access, but the clock was ticking. He found Elara huddled on a straw mattress in a small, windowless cell. Her scent was faint, strained from fear and exhaustion, but still carrying the deep, earthy undertone that was uniquely hers. She looked up, her moss-green eyes wide with shock. Kaelen? What are you? I failed you, Kaelen confessed, the words rough and difficult like tearing bark from an ancient tree. He knelt by the iron bars, the cold metal separating them. His goal was to restore her belief in herself and formulate the final plan. I kept the truth of Vane's treachery, his involvement in my Luna's death, secret for 4 years. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. I was only protecting my own grief. My initial distrust of you, my secrecy, it handed Vane the victory. Elara reached out, her fingers brushing the cold iron. The moment their eyes locked, Kaelen felt the deep, familiar pulse of connection. This time it wasn't just power, it was acceptance. I trusted you, she whispered, her voice fragile. I knew you were the only one who could stop him. I knew you were good beneath the alpha shell. Kaelen felt a powerful surge of emotion. He had finally allowed genuine, trusting affection to show. Lyra is being moved to an abandoned keep on the northern ridge, Vane's distraction, Kaelen revealed, sharing Lyra's location. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to expose him publicly where his power is nullified. He shared Ryland's proof. The preparation for the end began. You are the unifier. Your power is empathy. You can compel a moment of shared truth, a moment where the council can't ignore the proof I present. Elara's eyes darkened with resolve. As the bond pulsed, her fear gave way to fierce purpose. When? The annual court address, Kaelen stated, his voice absolute. It is the only time the entire council and the nobility are present in the Grand Hall. It will be the stage for Vane's coup, and his downfall. Chapter 21. The Rally. By the time Kaelen and Ryland left the dungeons, the cold, stale air felt invigorating. They immediately moved to the abandoned crypts beneath the central stables, a safe haven where their few remaining allies were covertly waiting. Kaelen's goal was to execute the initial stages of the plan. The loyal allies were few, Ryland, Scholar Line, still terrified but clutching the prophecy text, and 3 hand-picked, fiercely loyal guards. This is madness, sire, Line whispered, his teeth chattering despite the stable's warm air. If the prophecy fails. Prophecy doesn't fail, Scholar, Kaelen interrupted, his voice steely. Trust fails. We won't. Because Elara and the truth will be our weapons. Kaelen addressed his small, desperate group. His state was focused, resolved, and high tension. Ryland, you will position yourself high in the rafters. The moment Vane tries to silence me, you drop the evidence onto the High Council table. Line, you will speak to the Unifier text at that moment. And you, my guards, will ensure Elara is brought from the dungeons directly to the Grand Hall. She will walk beside me. The point of direct confrontation was imminent. The fate of the kingdom hinged on this one audacious move, like a single thin thread holding a massive weight. Kaelen looked at the rough sketch Rylan had drawn of the Grand Hall floor plan. He was preparing his formal address, not a speech of royal authority, but a confession and a challenge. With every step he took toward the crypt entrance, Kaelen felt the weight of the crown lift slightly, replaced by the lighter burden of shared purpose. He adjusted his tunic, ensuring the concealed blade he hadn't needed to use until now was secure. Kaelen walked toward the Grand Hall, the secret evidence already in position, his heart steady, finally free of the corrosive secret that had poisoned his life. Elara would be walking beside him soon, and together they would face Vane. Chapter 22, The Climax. The Grand Hall was a sea of shimmering silks, rich velvets, and the combined expectant sense of the assembled nobility. Kaelen stood on the dais facing the hundreds of eyes, a familiar, suffocating spectacle. His state was absolute, unified focus with Elara, the Alpha and Omega sense mingling together, signaling a challenge. Elara stood beside him, her presence a silent, radical defiance of tradition. She wore simple white, a deliberate contrast to the dark pomp of the court, and her gaze was steady. Kaelen began his annual address. He didn't speak of taxes or trade. He spoke of truth and betrayal. "My lords, my ladies," Kaelen's voice resonated, powerful yet strained. "For too long this court has been ruled by lies. Lies that cost the life of my Luna, lies that poisoned Lord Theron, and lies that placed the crown heir in danger." Vane rose, his face crimson, his powerful alpha scent erupting in furious denial. "Heresy. Treason. Silence the king." Vane's loyal guards moved forward. But then Kaelen fixed Vane with an icy glare. "I speak the truth, Cassian Vane," Kaelen roared. "You murdered my Luna to fracture my authority. You kidnapped my daughter to prove I was weak. And you framed the Unifier Omega to destroy the future of Vesper." The atmosphere was chaos, Alphas roaring, Omegas gasping. Vane screamed, "Detain the king. He is compromised." The turning point, just as Vane's loyalists surged, Elara stepped forward. She didn't speak. Her body moved on instinct, her eyes locking onto the confused, terrified faces of the council. She unleashed her full unifier power. The silver-blue energy didn't blast the room, it washed over it, a powerful, invisible tide of pure, compelling empathy. It felt like a sudden, crystalline silence had fallen over a noisy battlefield. For one terrifying, perfect moment, every Alpha, Beta, and Omega in the room was forced to feel the raw, undeniable emotional truth of Kaelen's words, and the selfless, protective intent radiating from Elara. The psychic shock broke Vane's political hold instantly. In that paralyzed moment, Rylan acted. As if summoned, a small, heavy file dropped from the rafters, landing with a thud directly onto the High Council table, its pages scattering. "The evidence!" Kaelen cried, his voice cutting through the silence. "The original documents of the Luna's death, proving Vane's treachery." Vane staggered back, his scent now that of pure, terrified defeat. He was subdued by Kaelen's loyal guards, who moved in swiftly, their movements unopposed. Kaelen had achieved victory through partnership, utilizing Elara's spiritual power and Rylan's calculated strategy. Kaelen placed a hand on Elara's shoulder, a silent, public declaration of their bond and her legitimacy. Chapter 23, The Reckoning. In the stillness that followed the intense emotional climax, Kaelen stood alone on the dais, Elara's presence a warm, reassuring anchor beside him. Vane and his chief conspirators were bound, smelling of bile and desperation. Kaelen's state was one of relieved exhaustion and quiet, absolute authority. His goal was to consolidate power and clean the political slate. He addressed the Loyalist Council, his voice now calm and measured, like the deep, steady current of a river. "The treason is clear. The evidence is irrefutable. Cassian Vane is stripped of all titles and privileges and will face judgment." Kaelen showed no mercy to the traitors but acted with unyielding justice. The treacherous guards were imprisoned. He then turned to his allies. "Lord Theron, you stood by the crown. You are rewarded with full contracts. Scholar Line, your dedication to the forgotten texts saved this kingdom. You will be my chief advisor on ancient law. Kaelen looked at Rylan, who was standing at attention. Head of the guard Rylan, you are now High Alpha Marshal of the Royal Guard. Winding down major plot threads, Kaelen established his new rule, free of Vane's corrupting influence. He glanced down into the hall. He saw Elara comforting Lyra, who had been brought in and witnessed the climax. Lyra was tearful but safe, clinging to Elara's white gown, a potent symbol of the peace Kaelen's choice had bought. Kaelen's chest ached with a new, beautiful emotion, relief mingled with a profound sense of rightness. Chapter 24. A New Foundation. That night, the palace was quiet again, the silence different this time. It was expectant, not oppressive. Kaelen and Elara shared a private, intimate moment in his solar, the place where he had suffered his deepest despair. Kaelen's goal was to affirm the relationship and establish the new structure of the court. His state was acceptance, love, and a quiet excitement for the future. He approached Elara, who was tracing the etchings on his granite desk. He felt it, clear as day, the protective bond, the deep trust, the simple, profound love for this woman who defied everything he thought he knew about power and status. The kingdom is safe, Kaelen murmured, his voice husky. Vane is gone. The council is in disarray, but they are obedient. We won. Elara looked up, her eyes shining with relief. We did, she agreed softly. Kaelen took her hands in his large, calloused hands completely enclosing her smaller ones. I admitted my failure to trust today, Elara. I won't fail again. I can trust you. I do trust you. More than I've trusted my own instincts in years. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her scarred knuckles. The prophecy speaks of the unifier who binds the Alpha's heart and mends the kingdom. I will not be the king who merely rewards his asset with gold. Kaelen looked out over the capital, Elara's unique, comforting scent filling his space. He saw a future, not just a threat. Elara, he said, the royal title gone, the raw man speaking. Remain by my side. Officially. As my partner. As my Luna. The thematic resonance was complete. The Alpha and Omega were united by trust and destiny, challenging the old hierarchy and forging a new foundation for the kingdom based on healing and truth. Epilogue SNE The New Dawn. 6 months later, the air in the grand hall smelled of fresh cedar and renewed hope. Kaelen presided over the royal council, no longer seated on a throne, but at a circular table. Elara sat at his right hand, her presence a quiet, powerful force. Among the counselors were Lord Theron, Scholar Line, and, most shocking to the old guard, several betas and omegas in prominent advisory roles, including a small delegation from the Shadow District. The rule of fear had ended. The reign of trust had begun. Kaelen smiled at Elara, a genuine, unguarded smile that crinkled the corner of his eyes. She was visibly pregnant, and her power, now used openly to heal the city's deep-seated social wounds, was radiant. She placed a hand over their child, the true unifier heir, and met Kaelen's gaze. As if fate demanded it, their bond, born of kidnapping, poison, and prophecy, was finally settling into the quiet, fierce joy of a family and a kingdom rebuilt.